The year was 1994. And one weekend in Maine, I got a new job, got engaged, and bought a house. All of these events would influence my life, but my attitude was changed by an unassuming older gentleman who owned the local hardware store. This lifelong renter was about to take on the challenges of a new home. Taking on the challenges of a new wife is a whole different speech. After I unpacked the boxes, I grabbed the lawnmower with zest, then struggled to push the machine through the jungle. Bam! I hit a rock. I twisted the blade into some modern-looking piece of art. Nice to admire, not very useful. Staring blankly at a wall of 22 different blades, I met Frank. Take a few, return what you don't use. Do you need my name or number? No, you're Tom Dowd. You live on Lime Rock Street, and you just moved in. And I just experienced small town living. When I returned the other blades, he said, if you ever need me, knock on my door or call me. And he meant it. My first memorable run-in with unconditional nice. A simple business model. Be a role model. Be nice. The flavor of the day business ideals of being customer-centered and people-driven are all in vogue. Not Frank. He's always done this. Every move based on being unconditionally nice. Not once has he asked me for business or anything else in return. Time goes by, like it always does. I started to go to the store up the street. They were open on Sunday. Then the big box stores started sprouting up. I was slowly migrating away, not even conscious of my inexcusable excuses to save a few cents. Fast forward 15 years. It was 9:58 on a cold February Sunday night in a driving rainstorm. The big stores were closing for the evening and didn't have time for my call. I was standing in my basement in yellow rubber boots with water up to my knees and a dehumidifier floating by. I attempted to siphon the water out through a garden hose. To no avail. My 3 sump pumps weren't working. One smelled of burning engine. Another whined with an alarm. Wee-oo, wee-oo, wee-oo. While a third sat quietly saying, call Frank, please. With water continuing to pour in and no end in sight, I made the humbling phone call. Hi, Frank. You may not remember me. This is Tom Dowd. I live on Lime Rock Street. My basement's flooded. I know who you are and where you live. I'll be there in a minute. He didn't ask how he could help. He just did. He picked me up to take me to the store to select a new sump pump. This mechanically deficient individual was overwhelmed again. This time, 27 choices. And I probably could have used them all. Take a few, return what you don't use, and I'll install it. On this day, I committed myself to Frank's store, but more importantly, to be this type of person. Shouldn't we all simplify our lives and make the effort to touch people here? Satisfaction guaranteed with an enlightening personality pleasantry with no expected reciprocity. In this me generation, hustle and bustle, I need it now, road rage, flip you some type of unwarranted gesture world we live in. Frank remains grounded. It's never about Frank. It's always about others. Pure, unadulterated, nice. On a recent flight to St. Louis, I casually struck up a conversation with a woman named Jane. I asked what she did. She smiled and said, "I try to be nice." She went on to say, "I used to be the mean twin, and I loved the attention. But I was also depressed, anxious, and suicidal." It's amazing what perfect strangers will tell you on the plane. With a happy tear rolling down her cheek, she said, "I woke up one morning screaming, 'Stop!' and committed myself to being nice, and my life turned around." Can this be some type of worldwide movement? This isn't just small town living. We are surrounded by Franks and Janes. Do you know who they are? Can it be you? We all have a choice to be a role model, to be nice. When someone's in need, lend them a hand. When they're not, give them a smile. Be unconditionally nice. Be unconditionally nice. Ladies and gentlemen, it also works with spouses. Thank you. This next one's called My Funeral. Have you ever imagined your own funeral? Who will do the eulogy? Who will be your pallbearers? Who will attend or even care? I attended my own funeral. Let me explain. But before I do, I need to disclose that no one died or was injured in the making of the speech. On a typical day where I was happily playing solitaire and checking out Facebook at work, I got the call. June 6th, the anniversary of D-Day. Not World War II. Displacement Day. The day my 23-year job was eliminated. Just like that. It was all over. Hard work, tenure, and skills had nothing to do with this cost-cutting decision. Is it curious that my first thought wasn't to call my wife, but that I had to find a new Toastmasters club? On my ride to work on that fateful day, a news report announced 175,000 new jobs in the U.S., making the unemployment rate 7.6%. On my ride home, I was on the other side. One of the 11.7 million unemployed. To grasp the magnitude, take the entire population of New York City, then add 4 million people. The call was like a shot to the head. I was being put to rest and people were preparing for my funeral. Condolences rolled in. Hugs happened. Tears flowed. How will people see you when you're gone? An old manager once asked if I ran through a wall when people followed. At the time, I didn't know the answer. I needed to know the answer. That was a lifeline, a call to action. Fast forward 6 years later. I don't recall a more calming day. A day of self-reflection, a chance to hover over my dead body and ask, was my life and career a success? The notes flooded in. Tom, you touched me. Personally and professionally more than you'll ever know. Tom, we love you. This is your next speech. I ran through the wall, and people followed. But how was I going to tell my 3 daughters that Dad was being sent to a farm just like his childhood dog? The spending freeze on shoes, clothes, and pizza is worse than death to teenagers. My middle child's head tilted at a mourner's angle as a tear slowly rolled down her cheek as if to fall on my casket. youngest held me in a bear hug as if it was the last time ever. My social media conscious 16-year-old told me that all responses to the relocation question on Facebook was, no, as if I had a choice. The denial, the anger, the acceptance, the exhaustive feeling of having my family watch my own demise. But my support system refused to let the last nail go into the coffin as they put in a crowbar made of emails, phone calls, and leads. I was being resuscitated. How many of you have a will prepared? A will reduces stress and chaos. The run through the wall question 6 years earlier had been my wake-up call. I didn't realize how it would prevent my professional passing. My eyes were wide open as I built an extraordinary career-saving and life-changing network. In Keith Ferrazzi's book, Never Eat Alone, he notes, build it before you need it. Real relationships built over the years provided me meaning and are the reason for my success. I wasn't 6 feet under. I was 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon. Or at least my next big leap. I wasn't flatlined. I was alive, and my support system was my CPR. My job loss was a celebration of life, not a funeral. It reminded me how deep my love and appreciation really are for my family, friends, and network. I wasn't defined by my job. I defined my own life and was going to do my funeral my way. No, I'm not going to belt out Sinatra. I lost my job, but I found me. I used my displacement as a reaffirmation that when I leave this earth, I'm leaving with no regrets. Think about your own funeral. When your spirit's hovering over the mourners, did you give them something to mourn about? That didn't come out right. Let's go back to the original question. Have you ever imagined your own funeral? Who will do the eulogy? Who will be your pallbearers? Who will attend or even care? My eulogy was shouted out by the many key people in my network who blew my trumpet with humbling accounts of who I was and had become. My pallbearers carried me when I couldn't go any further. The overwhelming flood of notes and messages showed who cared. I have to admit, I started writing the speech immediately after I got the call, including the ending. We all know we're going to die. Not that ending. The speech ending. The one where I secured a job. It wasn't overconfidence. It was just a belief that I was surrounded by an ironclad network that refused to stop giving me oxygen. Are you ready to see your own funeral? I saw mine, and it was beautiful. Thank you. So which one was the stronger speech? Okay. Why? Okay.
I feel like the first one's a better speech for our age demographic.
Yeah, it's more relatable to you as an audience. So I intentionally gave both to see how you would relate to both. So how important is relating to the audience? Okay. So if I started, I'm going to give you another story. And I want you to figure out what the message is in this particular story. I am the announcer at the U.S. National Toboggan Championships. You guys know what that is? The toboggans are these wooden sleds. You go down this wooden toboggan chute. It's in Camden. And they have about 450 teams that do this, and it's been going on for 25 years. And so being the announcer, I've done it for about 4 or 5 years, and it is a big social gathering. Some people like to compete, but really it's a social gathering, and every one of the 450 names is walking a real fine line when it comes to being appropriate or inappropriate. And And so one of the teams is coming down. I say, down the hill they come. And I don't look at the names ahead of time. There's just too many. Maybe I should. And here comes down the hill, losing your virginity. Sorry. In the crowd of 8,000 to 10,000 people was my 12-year-old daughter. And she turns to Mom and says, what's that? So Mom goes into the story of birds and bees, and this is what it's all about. My daughter says, I know what virginity is. What's losing? Now, what are some of the messages you can walk away from that story? How long was that story? 30 seconds? Maybe? What's the message? Okay. Well, be careful what I say in front of 10,000 people, but yes. But yeah, it could be careful what you say. It could be you thinking it's about naivety of children. It's not. It turns into they're a little bit more mature than we probably want them to be. You can take whatever you want out of that, because I didn't give it the full-blown context that it probably deserved. But you walk away with some type of message that's in there. You may not remember the message when you walk out of here. 2 months from now, though, you're going to say, there's some guy up on stage talking about losing, toboggan, Virginia, I don't know what it was. But you're going to remember the concepts of the story, and it's going to bring you back to the message you walked away with. So you may not always remember the message, but you may remember components of the story that help you to remember it. What are some other ways to remember the speech? Because that's my goal as a speaker, is to have you at least retain just a little bit of what I said, somewhere along the line.
Well, repetitiveness.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there were a couple points where I repeated. I reinforced the start with the finish in a couple of them.
That go along with specific things you said.
Okay, so the gestures that match up with the words or meaning or emotion that's going on at that moment. Absolutely.
Color often has these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, emotion.
No, I appreciate that, because my wife doesn't think I'm funny. But yeah, every once in a while, and to be funny, it's really interesting, because I'm not. I'm more I'd rather be uptight. It's just who I am. I'm just a business uptight guy. And I've learned to loosen up. I've learned to be me. I am, in the present tense, painfully shy and introvert. And I've learned to break out of that. I've learned to be me as we go through this. And when it comes to humor, I would look out in the crowd and say, well, nobody's laughing. Like, I'm looking for gut, belly laughing, and it's not happening. I'm like, it's silent. You don't need a full-blown, out-loud laugh. You might get a couple scoffs. But if you get a couple corners of the mouth that turn up, it means you got their attention. That's all that you need. So I had to stop looking for the big laughs, because I'm not a comedian, nor am I trying to be. But if I can get you to do this just a little bit, it means that I found a way to emotionally connect with you. You realize we all share the same emotions? Happiness, sadness, anger. So what, as a speaker, am I trying to do with emotion? Connect. I have to have them relate to you. So that story about Frank, does anyone know who Frank is? Besides me? Do you have to know who Frank is for it to relate to you? So why does that story relate to you?
Because like you said, we all like surrounded by people like Frank.
Okay.
And so when we're listening to your story, we can kind of put ourselves in a situation where we were, I don't know, where we interacted with someone like Frank.
I thought the story about the woman on the plane really made me feel it.
Okay.
Frank's this old guy, and maybe a different generation, but she sounds like she's probably 30, 40 years old, and she made a conscious decision to be nice, and I think, wow, I could do that too. Wow, that could be me.
So how old was the woman in the story?
You kind of made him sound a little older.
Okay. Part of that's a cold in my voice. Now, how old do you think she was? Guess. 60? Okay. 35. Is it relevant?
No.
Okay, so you can scream out any number you want. It's not relevant. There's a piece in the story, and it's true, by the way. Her exact words, I didn't quote her exact words, but the concept, everything she said was accurate. She said, I woke up one day in the 8th grade, and I screamed, stop. Now, if I added that piece in there about the 8th grade, does it change the story at all?
A little.
Why?
Because it gives context to how old she might be, and when she realized that she didn't want to be that person.
Okay, and is that a good or a bad thing? And that's not a loaded question, by the way.
I think it's a good thing, because she recognized it early before it progressed and made it worse.
Okay.
But at the same time, if you don't say it, we wonder about how long she was unhappy with. So I mean, if you're going for like a thoughtful, you want the audience to think about the situation, I would say an 8th grade thing.
You bring up some really interesting points, because the last class said it was too young. We're all impressionable at that age, so it's not that big of a deal to say I'm going to wake up one day and be nice.
But is it bad to wake up? Like, if you're impressionable, is it bad if it's something like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I had it in there at one point, and I took it out because I was going over time. but I started to really think about is how relevant is that 8th grade to the story? And then, what's that?
I don't think so.
It doesn't, because you don't know about it.
Right.
And so it doesn't change the meaning of the message. But if I had added it in there, it actually creates 2 separate meanings. One might be good, one might not be good. And so now I'm pulling the audience apart versus bringing them together. And it became a really interesting point. But I'm glad you brought it up that it hit home for you there. Because when I tell the story, my very first draft, I didn't have that paragraph in it. By the way, it's an accurate story. It's true. But I added another story about Frank. And there's this guy, he added on to our house, and he was the foreman, and he went to college for a construction college. And he went to Frank, and Frank handed him all of this construction material, and he's doing shopping at the store. And he's about to cash out, and Frank said, no, it's on me. And I was going to add that story in there. But then at that point, it becomes 100% about Frank. And so what you don't know during that point is, Tom, is your message really about be like Frank? Or is it, can we all be like this? And I'd given this speech to somebody in Maryland, a friend of mine, and they said, wow, that's really interesting, who lived around Maine, or lived in Maine. And she said, that's a nice small town story. I said, but that's not my intention of being this small town. We're surrounded by it. She said, it doesn't come out. And she made me go back into the speech and say, you have to tell the audience you want it beyond just your little town that you live in. Because I'm going to give this speech to people in Canada, I hope, as on my way to my goal to become world champion in public speaking.
Yeah.
But I have to think of those audiences. And if I don't, it's going to hit. And it's going to hit hard. So there's a piece, my very first time, I've been one speech away from the world semifinals twice. The first time was purely by accident. I finished in 3rd place at my club level out of 3 people in a contest. The top 2 people had commitments the following weekend and couldn't go. So there I was saying, I guess I'm in the next level competition. And so I took a lot of feedback. My skin got very thick over the next couple weeks. And I wrote this speech about a dog who, long story short, came up from Louisiana, almost died 3 times before we even got him. And so he writes us this thank you letter from the dog. But I surprised the audience at the end and said, surprise, this letter's from a dog. And they're like, yeah, it's too late. You lost me. You confused me. I didn't know who you were. So no wonder I finished in last place. Because I wrote the speech as a story. And I didn't think about the message. It was just a neat story. A dog who has 9 lives, who's been able to survive from Louisiana to Maine, and he gets to us and woohoo! And you say that's a nice story, and you walk out saying, that was a nice story, but I didn't have one. But the message was really about overcoming these obstacles, and if he can do it as a dog, why can't I do it as a person? And you start to figure these things out. So I changed and added messaging in there, and I was fortunate enough to get to the one speech away from the world semifinal. And I used a lot of statistics about the Humane Society. In the U.S., the Humane Society says that X number of dogs die and ... and are euthanized, ... And I'm sitting at lunch a couple hours before the competition, and I turned to this person and I said, so, they just made an announcement that there's 200 people here, and 80% of them are from Canada. All my statistics are U.S. Do I need to change my speech? The person said, are you a judge? I said, turned to the person to the other side and I said, do I need to? And they said, yes. So I realized I'm going to age myself here. It's before BlackBerries and smartphones and laptops. So like I'm in the business office of the hotel looking up statistics, going, does Canada even have a Humane Society? So I was not relating to my audience. I will tell you, don't also, under that type of pressure, change your speech in the last minute, because I forgot the words 2 minutes in. And gave the greatest 6-minute speech of my life after. Why? Yep.
You had no choice but to pull something out.
I stopped competing. And I just started delivering a message. And it became a really big moment for me. Not only at the process of understanding your audience, but it became a very big meaning for me of those 6 minutes were probably the most enjoyable 6 minutes I've ever had on stage. And I was petrified. But I don't remember being petrified because I could see the audience was there rooting me on. Probably got a few more laughs that I didn't deserve. I probably got a few more cries that I didn't deserve. I had a line of people outside after the competition telling me about their dogs and cats and birds and turtles and everything else that they had going on. But it was a really great moment of saying it was a chance for me to be me and a chance to write my speeches based off of who I am and how they relate back to the audience. And I stopped trying to impress people. And I started to relate to people. And there's a difference. There's a really big difference between it. Something also very lucky happened that weekend. And the guy who won, a guy by the name of Joey Grondin, he's been to the World Semifinals three times, and he won that year and finished 3rd place in the world. And I see Joey working out in the morning before the competition, and I said, hey, Joe, you probably don't know who I am, but I saw you 6 months ago at the last convention. You were fantastic. In fact, a lot of the things that you taught, because he gave a speech on how to give an effective presentation that differentiates you. And I said, I took a lot of the things that you taught, and I used that in my speech tonight. He said, I'm using it in the competition tonight. He said, that's great. Are you competing? I said, yeah. He said, aren't you a professional speaker? He said, yeah. I said, oh. So all of a sudden, my confidence is shot going into this. Then I have that lunch event. Then an hour before the competition, I'm there with this guy that I do somewhat familiar with. He's a fellow competitor. And he taps me on the shoulder and said, man, I hope I win this thing, the World Championship. I said, why is that? He said, so I can quit my day job. So what do you mean? He said, oh, travel around the world and just be a speaker. You do that? Like, my mind's like in the 7 minutes, not the what happens with this thing. And I said, are you a professional speaker? He said, yeah. I said, ugh. 8 competitors that night. 4 of them are professional speakers. 2 of them get up in their speech and say, as a professional speaker, ... I was like, ah! It's no wonder I couldn't remember my words. My confidence was shot. And that became a really big learning of relate to the audience. Be yourself. Be true to yourself. And make sure that you're just talking with the audience, not to the audience, that you're just having this conversation with someone. Stop competing And just do it for the love of it, if you really do truly love it. And realize that you're okay. You can hang in there with these guys if you need to. And I got a ton of confidence out of it. And so I stopped working on my communication skills and started working on my confidence. So how do you build your confidence? Someone tells you to relax. You're sitting there up on stage like this, and they say, "Oh, you should relax." How do you gain confidence? You should gain confidence. You should really gain confidence. Play baseball. You should gain confidence at the plate. I led, by the way, the 7th grade getting hit by the pitch, and then I quit. How do you gain confidence at the plate?
Me?
Yeah.
I thought I was gonna smack his pitch.
Okay.
I thought that was crazy.
Okay, so repeatedly.
Yeah.
So you keep going up to the plate. You keep getting up on stage. And the times that you make a mistake are the greatest moments ever. First time I ever remember speaking public. I was in the 7th grade. Gave a school presentation. I sat in the last row in the 4th seat. I walk up there, I give my speech, and my head is spinning. And I am doing, I don't remember where I am, and all of a sudden I sat down in the 3rd row in the 3rd seat. Like I didn't know where I was going when I sat down. And I vowed at that very moment to never speak again. Until the next year. And then the next year, we had these presentations. It was an economy class, economics. And this person was giving their presentation, and I thought they were droning on, but that's just me. And they were going on, and I thought they finished. Now, if you have a conclusion, make sure it's one conclusion and it just ends. You don't keep ending it over, oh wait, is it ending here? Is it ending? Well, she ends it the first time, so I get up because I'm next, and she keeps going on. So there I was stuck in the middle, standing next to her while she's presenting next to the teacher's desk. So I kind of just sat on the teacher's desk not knowing what to do, and she ended 3 or 4 more times. And then I had to go. And I'm remembering these moments saying, I will never do it again. I will do everything in my power to avoid it. You know what I did in my second book, the premise, it's called From Fear to Success, a Practical Public Speaking Guide. For someone who is, in the present tense, painfully shy and introverted, is I realized that I wasn't having communication issues. I was having confidence issues. And you build that confidence up by constantly doing it. Getting yourself into those positions and wanting to make mistakes. You strive for perfection, will it ever be perfect? No. But if you strive for that perfection, and then you learn from it the next go-around, you become a better speaker, a better communicator. For 20 years, as a communication major in college, being told for 18 of those years, 18 to 20, that I couldn't communicate. On my performance appraisals at work, I was on this roller coaster ride, had some ups, had some downs, had some success, had a lot of failures. And you know what I realized? It was my communication skills, but I wasn't having communication issues. It was my lack of confidence in my ability to communicate. So joining Toastmasters, continuing to put yourself out there outside of your comfort zone and putting yourself up on stage when you don't want to be there, and preparation. Preparation is key to making sure you can't just wing it. You can't pretend to wing it. Preparation gave me a ton of confidence. And when I lost my job after 23 years, that story is true. I started job shopping after I wrote the speech, or notes to my speech. I called somebody from a Toastmasters club who I knew, who worked at a bank, and thus started the job search. I went up the street, 1,000 yards up this road to a parking lot, and talked to an old manager at another building. Thus started the job search. Because I had confidence to have conversations with people that I would have never had before. This is public speaking. Standing up here speaking to you is obviously public speaking, but so is it. So is a one-on-one conversation. So is talking to your wife, your spouse, your children, your little league team as a coach. Talking to your coach. How many times do you have to influence people around you when you have no power? have no reason to listen to me. None. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to remember a thing I say. I hope you do. But if I can have some type of little influence on you, you may not remember my name, but you might remember that influence somewhere along the lines. It means that I've done something that I can. That comes with confidence and it comes with communication skills. And when you put those two together, it's very powerful. I started my new job in August, 59 days after I lost. My boss said to me yesterday, I've got you slated to take over my job. I've been in the job since August 26th. That felt good to hear. And he's a great guy, a great boss. Part of it's relationship building, but I would have never built that relationship because I would have kept to myself in building relationships when I didn't have the confidence. But we have a strong relationship, a strong personal relationship and professional relationship. And he knows who I am as a person, not just a colleague or a coworker. That's why I think he appreciates the work that I'm doing. The hard work and that stuff takes care of itself. But it's the ancillary things, your ability to communicate effectively, your confidence in getting the job done. This public speaking class is going to pay huge dividends for you if you take it seriously. Not that you don't, but there are some classes you could sit there and say, yeah, what am I going to get out of it? Like geometry. What do you ever get out of geometry? But you sit there and say, what am I ever going to get out of this? Or you say, I'm going to avoid it. I'm never going to need it. That's where I tell you you're wrong. So what other questions? Comments?
The talking sum phone.
So, oh, friend, please. So I heard a couple chuckles when I said, please. I had to. This is how important one word is. The 8th grade, I took it out. The please, I added. And I've given it to a couple people. And I said, call Frank. And it really is. It's this dead sump up. It's just sitting there, and the water's up to here. And it just one of those random thoughts that came to mind. Like, call Frank. And I gave it to someone, and I got a couple chuckles. And I, by accident, threw in please another couple times. And I got a couple second laughs out of it. And it's not about making you laugh, but it's about giving the audience permission to laugh. What do I mean by that? Yeah, I'm talking about my funeral. And you're thinking, like, where's this guy going to sing about funeral? And then I say no one died or was injured in the making of the speech. Gives you permission to take a breath and say, okay, he's not going to hold this somber cloud over my head for the next 7 minutes. Or at least that's the intention. So when you say, please, and I had talked to this guy by the name of Ed Tate. Ed Tate was a world champion of public speaking. I think it was 2000, year 2000, somewhere around there. And I was fortunate enough to get his feedback on a speech I was competing with last year. And I gave a speech called Jack about a friend of mine who passed away. And he started by saying, so how do you want the feedback? Do you want it glossy, semi-glossy, or unvarnished? And what's he mean by that? Yeah. Should I filter it and tell you you're the greatest thing ever and then you move on? Or should I hit you between the eyes and make you a better speaker? So I naturally said, make it unvarnished. And he started by saying, oh, here comes another death, dying, and injured speech. And what's he mean by that? Yeah, it's one of those, I'm trying to emotionally connect with the audience, so I instantly go for a tearjerker. It's a lot harder to have a mix between the two. I tried to, on the first speech, Unconditionally Nice, not make it too sad, balance it there, add a few pieces. I tried to be funny in there. But death, dying, and injured speech, oh great, here we come. And he said, you're just like everyone else who's competing. Everyone's trying to find some tearjerker and make us all cry, and they think you're going to get points from the judges with it. Sameness. It's the same as everyone else. And he said, the sameness comment also means how you're delivering this. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're the same. You use the same voice for Jack as you do for yourself. And my first reaction, very defensive I might add, is I'm not out to be all these different characters. I'm not one of those people that comes in and wants all the voices for The Simpsons. I'm just not like that. I'm this introverted guy. I'm not going to sit there and be this person I'm not. But I've told you a couple of times I'm trying to be me in these speeches. And I'm trying to be me. I'm telling you I don't do voices, and yet you heard, what, 3 different voices, 4 different voices? How can I say that without contradicting myself?
And it was your situation. So you are being you. We're still talking about what happened to you, but like in order for the audience to understand the story better, we need to have different voices.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I looked at the Jack speech and I tried to make some voices. Like I had a little run-in with the cops, with Jack, and I tried to give the cop a voice. And it felt so forced, because I was trying to be what Ed wanted me to be. And Ed, to his credit, at the end of this whole hour we spent together, said, you can ignore every bit of feedback that I have, because at the end of the day, it's your speech. And I should have taken that. Instead, I went home and I stressed over. I tried to figure out, what do I want this thing to be? And I tried to make it what everyone else wanted it to be. And I took every bit of feedback and I made it that way. Well, I wrote this speech from scratch this year. And so it's a true story about someone that relates directly to me. And I got to put in the voices I wanted to put in as I hear them in my head. There's a lot of stuff coming up here. But I get to put them in there. Jane's voice? Jane's voice has been 4 different pitches over the last week. In fact, it was probably 2 different pitches from the last class. I think I intentionally did that. Well, I think I did intentionally do that. I've got this little cold. I'm trying to figure out which range to put it in. But the voices, what do they do? Because it's not all about being different characters. You have to be careful. And sometimes you just have to have straightforward speech. But why did it become relevant there? What did it do for you as an audience?
Make it better tone.
Okay, set a tone. You're now in. You're part of this thing. You're like, oh, look, who else is coming to this party? They're really. You're like, yeah, okay. And where else is it? It's like, even if you think it's crazy, or you think the voice, my daughter's 13 years old, and said, you sound like you're making fun of old people with Frank. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I don't know. She said, but it sounds like you're making fun of Frank. And I said, I would never do that. She said, you need to go deeper. I said, what? Frank? Because I'm trying to put his voice. You don't know what Frank sounds like. What's it matter to you? You just need to know it's a different pitch, a different inflection. That's what you need to know. So I went a little bit deeper on it. And I actually accomplished 2 things by doing it. Is one, it no longer sounded like I was making fun of Frank. And I actually enunciated better by going to a different voice. Because she called me a mumbler at one point. My 13-year-old, by the way, can evaluate has evaluated all my speeches, and is more critical than you never imagined, and I'm so thankful for it. The other thing is, I put her in the front row during speech competitions because she knows every word to every speech. So if for some reason I forget, Dad, it's Jack. Okay. But you have to get very thick skin. Like my first book is called Doubting Thomas, The Transformation of a Doubting Thomas, growing from a cynic to a professional in the corporate world. I am cynic and I am defensive in how I would react. These people would give me feedback and I'd say, you're wrong. But as soon as I turned it around and said, just keep giving it to me over and over and over, I became so much better as a communicator because of it. Any last questions or comments? I don't think we're running out of time.
Right. Yeah, we have about a minute and a half left, I think.
Okay. Any last comments or questions? coming in and